Hello and welcome into another episode of Locked On Wolves. Today on the show, it was a split weekend for the Wolves, a disappointing loss to the Bucks on Friday night, and we'll call it a win is a win over the Nets on Saturday. A really impressive defensive performance without Rudy Gobert from Minnesota. Offensive issues both games. We'll talk about the problems from the weekend. We'll talk about the bright spots. It's all upcoming on the show. Welcome in. You are Locked On Wolves.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Beecken. I'm the host of Locked On Wolves. Today's episode is brought to us by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Happy Monday, everybody. Hopefully you had a fantastic weekend. And Wolves haven't played since Saturday, but this is a bit of a hybrid show. We're going to talk a little bit about Friday's loss to the Bucks, a little bit about Saturday's win over the Nets, and kind of the big picture takeaways from the first two games out of the All-Star break. Of course, the Wolves have a bit of a weird schedule right now. All these back-to-backs kind of compressed together. And I want to talk about high points and low points from both games kind of combined. So I'm going to flip back and forth a little bit. We'll talk about each performance and how the Wolves, maybe a little bit more of a focus on the Nets game Saturday because it's a little more fresh. I just want to kind of pick a couple of things to pull out of this weekend as we look ahead to some more challenging back-to-backs here in the next couple of weeks. First off, though, a big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. And you can follow on X at Locked On T-Wolves and also at Beecken with two B's, two E's, C-K-E-N. All right, on Friday night, the Timberwolves lost the Milwaukee Bucks. That was the ESPN All Access day. The Wolves didn't tip off until after 9 o'clock Friday night. And it was very clearly the first game after the All-Star break. I hosted the postcast live on Locked On Sports Minnesota on Friday night with Tyler Metcalf from Canis Hoopus. And, we kind of broke down like the high points immediately. Like the immediate reaction to that was kind of an uneven start on both ends. The offense kind of clicked, though, overall in the first half. It was against a good opponent. The Wolves were good enough in the first half. The bench was outstanding early in that game, and then it all fell apart in the third quarter, and it was a combination of things. Of course, the Bucks were 3-7 under Doc Rivers coming in, so they were certainly motivated to come out of the All-Star break in a much better way than they went into the All-Star break. They clearly were more interested in competing, especially on the defensive end, than what we'd seen really all season from the Bucks, but especially more recently under Doc Rivers. And, it's a team, as Tyler and I talked about Friday, they have really strong defensive personnel. No matter what, to this point in the season, they were like the 17th ranked defense or something coming into Friday's game. But Giannis is an incredible defender, right? Brook Lopez, really good interior defender. They have a good defensive team, minus Dame Lillard. They just needed to be activated. And they really were against the Wolves on Friday. And it was probably equal parts the Bucks playing well on defense and the Wolves just kind of struggling offensively for stretches, especially that third quarter. Minnesota got back in it at the end. They got to within 3 points with about 30 seconds left before Dame hit that really tough shot, mid-range jumper on the right side of the floor over Conley, and that pretty much sealed the game. But, overall, it wasn't a horrifically played game by Minnesota. It was just timely or untimely, I should say, turnovers, allowing fast break points the other way from Milwaukee. The Wolves' transition defense wasn't as good as it had been for much of the season. And then you had the Bucks, Giannis getting to the line a billion times. To be clear, not a complaint about the officiating. That was just him being an aggressor. He gets a nice whistle, but he's really aggressive. He shot 21 free throws. Dame had 4. That was all the Bucks had free throw wise, 25. Well, the Wolves as a team only shot 13. The Bucks were more aggressive offensively. They were more aggressive defensively. And they turned the Wolves over in big spots. I know the Wolves only had 13 on the night, which is a fine number. It's less than they're averaging per game this season. But there were some inopportune moments to have those live ball turnovers that sent the Bucks back the other way. And the Wolves, again, transition defense was spotty at best and downright bad for parts of the game. So losing the third quarter 36-13, obviously that's what sealed their fate. They won 2 of the other 3 quarters by a combined 22 points. They won the second and fourth quarter. It was the third quarter where things came apart. And then Saturday, the Wolves took on the Nets, and it started kind of like the whole first half was kind of reminiscent of the third quarter against the Bucks, albeit with a little bit better defense. Of course, the Nets, this version of the Nets team doesn't exactly have, the offense as a Dame and Giannis-led Bucks team. But, Mikal Bridges is a challenge, and Jaden was great against Bridges. The Wolves defended the three-point line extremely well. The first quarter was like watching a game straight out of 2002. It was, 23-22 at the end of the first. The Wolves they scored 19 points in the second quarter. They had 42 points. Minnesota did at halftime on Saturday night, which I believe was the lowest they've ever had in any half this season. The defense was good enough, so they were only down 3 at halftime. Again, the defense was good enough early in that game, and it only got better. Minnesota, they only scored 42 in the first half. They only gave up 41 in the second half to the Brooklyn Nets. And yeah, Brooklyn's got a pretty inept offense, but they've got some talented offensive players, right? Mikal Bridges, we know. Dennis Schroeder can do damage off the bench. Cam Thomas is dangerous if he gets going. And they forced Mikal Bridges into 1 of 11 from 3. Cam Thomas into 0 of 5 from 3. Combined, they were 14 of 40 from the field. Bridges and Thomas together. And then Schroeder was just 4 of 14 off the bench, plus some poor sportsmanship there at the end. He didn't like that the Wolves were trying to avoid a shot clock violation in the final 30 seconds. Like, I don't know, just grow up. Don't play pro basketball if that's going to bother you. Like, these guys don't want to turn over. Like, just, of course they're going to shoot the ball. It wasn't the game clock. It was the shot clock. Anyway, I don't want to spend any more time on that. That's crazy. So Friday was a disappointing loss, but as Tyler and I talked about on the postcast Friday night, there's not any one like flashing red light, like, oh man, this was terrible. Bad transition defense. Yes. Sloppy offense. We'll talk a little bit more about that. Inopportune turnovers, not playing quite as hard as Milwaukee did in this game. All those things are true, but none of them are like, oh no, here we go again. Right. Saturday, the first half was a lot more of those same offensive problems. It was Ant driving into six guys. It felt like 6 guys, right? It driving into just at times 6 guys, right? Because the offense and the defense, the spacing wasn't good for Minnesota, but it was really more like they had open shooters on Saturday in the first half. It was more just failing to find them. So it was in some ways similar results as the offensive issues Friday, but I thought it was a little bit of a different problem. It was less missing open shots than it was not generating those open shots on Saturday early in the game. So the first half was similar. The second half, the Wolves didn't really pull away until the fourth quarter. I think they trailed early mid fourth quarter, and then they just absolutely locked down. They ended up only giving up 20 points in the fourth. They scored 31 themselves, which, after scoring 42 points in the first half, to score 31 in the fourth alone and 59 in the second half was really nice to see. They barely cracked 100 points, but holding Brooklyn to 86 on 33.7% shooting, 17% from 3-point range were the Brooklyn Nets, and only 11 free throw attempts. Side note, this is really funny. Like Minnesota, if you just it's fun to just kind of scroll through Basketball Reference and Clean the Glass, look at, just what stands out. Minnesota, we know they don't play at a very fast pace. They also turn it over a bunch, and they have a really good effective field goal percentage. So what does that tell you? It tells you they're just not getting that many shots up at the rim, right? Or their offense would be better because they're turning it over and they don't play fast. They are dead last in field goal attempts per game, just 84.6 field goal attempts per game for Minnesota, and 30th in the league. They shot 84 times against the Nets on Saturday. Brooklyn attempted 104 shots. Minnesota shot the ball 20 less times from the field than the Brooklyn Nets, and they outscored them by 15 points. So, it's a little bit of a props to the Wolves' offensive efficiency. But as it turns out, it wasn't that efficient on Saturday, especially. They were 43% for the field, 31.5% from 3. 23 free throw attempts is nice, 74% at the line. But Brooklyn shot under 34% from the field and 17% from 3-point range and only attempted 11 free throws. So that's really more about the Wolves' defense than it is about anything else. All right. I want to get into a couple more key points from both of these games. I'll do individual studs and duds from Saturday because it's fresh, and I want to shout out a couple of good performances that we saw, especially without Rudy Gobert. Haven't talked about that yet. So we'll talk about no Rudy. We'll talk about McDaniels specifically. Friday and Saturday, I think, is a good thing to cover. We'll peek ahead at the week. We'll do all that here next. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends over at Grammarly. No matter what kind of work you do, how you communicate is key. All those emails, reports, and presentations are equally important to the collaboration needed to get things done, and Grammarly can help. Grammarly is your AI writing partner to help you communicate more effectively and efficiently so you can make a bigger impact at work. Better writing simply means a stronger impact. 96% of Grammarly users report that Grammarly helps them craft more impactful writing. Grammarly works across 500,000 apps and websites. By understanding your writing in context, Grammarly provides relevant, personalized suggestions. Their tone suggestions help you navigate even the most difficult work conversations. Make a bigger impact at work with Grammarly. Sign up and download for free at Grammarly.com/podcast. That's Grammarly.com, Grammarly.com/podcast. Easier said, done. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. All right, couple additional key points here from the weekend. So on Friday, the Wolves were okay defensively, except for when the Bucks went crazy at the end of the game. Well, let me rephrase that. Besides the Giannis fouling thing, right? And then Dame going nuts toward the end of the game. Because Dame was very quiet in the first half. He was all out of sorts, very discombobulated, bad turnovers, like missed his first 5 or 6 shots of the game. But then, sure enough, coming out of halftime, Dame gets hot. He's awesome down the stretch, hits that nutso three-pointer from the slot right in front of the Wolves bench, right in front of Chris Finch, really, and then hits that essentially game-sealing shot in the final 30 seconds over Conley on the right side of the floor. But besides that, the defense was okay against Milwaukee on Friday. I thought. Saturday was fantastic without Rudy Gobert. Gobert tweaked his ankle, which he had done earlier this year, and I think missed one game officially due to the sprained ankle, but it had been bothering him. He'd been on the injury report for a week or two, back around the time they played in Boston, that East Coast swing. I think Washington might have been where he tweaked it initially, but, I don't know, 4 or 5, 6 weeks ago. So he tweaks his left ankle again in the third quarter on Friday night against Milwaukee, does not play on Saturday, second night of a back-to-back. And Minnesota, without Rudy Gobert, holds the Nets to the numbers I cited just a little bit ago, last segment, 86 points on 33% shooting, 33.7%, 17% from three, only 11 field goal attempts for Brooklyn. And this was without Rudy Gobert. And I was a little bit worried about how the Wolves were going to handle. I shouldn't say worried. I wasn't worried about the Wolves beating the Nets. I thought the Wolves would beat the Nets. But Jaden McDaniels hasn't played that well of late. Friday night against Milwaukee, he had 2 quick fouls against Giannis, picked up a third very early in that game, ended up with 5 fouls and I think just 2 points, played very limited minutes on Friday night, 24 minutes, 1 of 5 shooting, 2 points, and 5 fouls on Friday for Jaden. And this goes back to before the All-Star game, where I just don't think he's been as impactful defensively, and he certainly hasn't been as impactful offensively, of late. Let's see. I guess right before the break, he dropped 17 in the last game over Portland, but the game before that, he was scoreless in 24 minutes and was really ineffective, ended up being a blowout win. But he hasn't been himself going back a few weeks. And he was great on Saturday. He was really good defensively, especially against Mikal Bridges. He was the primary defender on Bridges, held him to 7 of 21 from the field and 1 of 11 from 3. He did have 8 assists and no turnovers, but forcing the ball out of Bridges' hands to, these Nets shooters that otherwise couldn't hit the broadside of a barn was the right thing to do. Schroeder was 1 of 5 from 3. Lonnie Walker was 1 of 3. Cam Johnson was 2 of 7, did not shoot the ball well, and he's obviously a good shooter. Cam Thomas, 0 of 5. And Dorian Finney-Smith, 1 of 4. So credit Jaden McDaniels for the work he did on the ball on Saturday. It does feel like lately he's been getting beat off the dribble more often, and that happened a little Saturday too. Again, when he was guarding quicker players, right? Like there were a couple of times I think I think Cam Thomas might have taken him off the dribble at one point in the game. Schroeder definitely did. But for the most part, I think Nickeil Alexander-Walker has been the superior point of attack defender for stretches this season than Jaden McDaniels. And I don't know if it's just getting banged up, the assignments he's taking every night with his size. Like, he's so big, McDaniels is. But Alexander-Walker, I thought Alexander-Walker was awesome on Friday night, by the way. Did not shoot the ball well at all on Saturday. It was 0 of 6 from the field, missed all 5 of his three-point attempts, but was, again, his typically awesome self defensively. And that was really important with no Rudy Gobert. But get this, without Rudy, the Wolves still managed to block 9 shots in this game. Cat had 2 blocks, Nas had 3, Nickeil Alexander-Walker had a block, Monte Morris had a block, Kyle Anderson, Anthony Edwards all had blocks. It was, without Rudy Gobert, a very impressive defensive performance. On the other end of the floor, the Wolves offense did struggle. And I would also attribute part of that to not having Rudy Gobert. I mean, the Nets switch a bunch, which is how they handle pick and rolls. And without Rudy Gobert setting screens, like, Cat's a good enough screener, other than when he gets into, moving screen happy mode, because he does that where he gets a bunch of offensive fouls in a row. That didn't happen. But not having Rudy hurts from that regard. He's one of the best screeners in the league, and we can joke all we want. David Locke of Locked On Jazz and the Locked On Podcast Network loved to talk when Rudy was in Utah about his screen assists. And it's a real thing to some extent. Can we overblow that? Yeah, sure. I mean, sometimes I think that can get blown out of proportion. But when you don't have him out there setting screens, you see what that means. It was a switching team with size like Brooklyn, not a fantastic defensive team, not a fantastic team by any stretch in any way, with an interim coach, et cetera, et cetera. It's still hard to take a team off the dribble if they're switching everything. They've got good length, and you don't have Rudy Gobert out there setting screens. I mean, the Wolves opened the game with 3 turnovers in the first 2.5 minutes. And that continues to be an issue for Minnesota. And it was really even into the second quarter of this game. I don't know exactly what they were, how many turnovers they had in the second half, but it was a lot less than they had early in this game. 3 turnovers in the first 2.5 minutes, bleeding into the second quarter, still down at halftime. The second half was much cleaner for Minnesota. This was also a very physical game, and there weren't very many foul calls, at least not until late. And I think part of that is what happened with Dennis Schroeder there. He got chippier and chippier as the game went on because the officials were letting things go, which overall, to be clear, I'm okay with. I'd rather have less foul calls and have it be a more physical game. That's fine for Minnesota, right? Like, they're totally, in fact, that's better for the Timberwolves. I know the Wolves love to complain about foul calls, not getting foul calls, and a lot of times justifiably so. But a physical game with less foul calls benefits Minnesota because of how physical they are defensively. And offensively, I mean, Ant can finish their contact, which is a blessing and a curse. It's a curse in the sense that he does, we talked about this a few weeks ago, it's the Shaq treatment. He's too powerful. He runs guys over. He can finish this through contact. He gets, quote unquote, marginal contact when SGA literally wraps his hand around his forearm on a dunk, and it's marginal contact because Ant is so physically imposing. It tricks referees into not calling fouls, and apparently tricks them in the last 2-minute report too. Upon video review, it's still tricking people. It's still the craziest officiating related thing we've seen this year by far. I digress. The point here is, the Wolves are better when the officials let more stuff go, because they can finish their contact at the rim. Both Cat and Ant actually do finish their contact fairly well. But then also they're such a good 3-point shooting team, and they weren't Saturday, but overall they are, that driving and kicking is going to generate these open threes for catch and shoot guys well north of 40% individually, like Conley and Monte Morris and Alexander Walker and Jaden last year. And at times this year's, the shooting's not been quite as good, but it's still solid. Like, they got enough really good catch and shoot guys that an Ant drive, a Cat drive, a Conley drive and kick. We saw Monte Morris drive and kick to Conley for a made 3 in this game when they shared the floor together. A physical game with less fouls called is going to benefit the Timberwolves. And that's one of the reasons, by the way, that I'm not too worried. Well, I shouldn't say not too worried, that I don't share some of the same concern about playoff basketball for the Wolves, because despite how much they complain about a lack of foul calls, they can and do play through physical defense, and they play physical defense themselves. And overall this year, they're pretty middle of the pack in terms of opponent free throw rate. They were top 10 for a long time, but that's been driven down very rapidly over the past few weeks. they've been a lot handsier defensively, and the officials are calling stuff. Less will be called in the playoffs as a general rule, and that's going to benefit Minnesota. And it's going to open up jumpers, right? More the paint being clogged and bodies being in the paint and bodies hitting the floor, all that stuff should generate loose balls bouncing open shooters, offensive rebounds, tap outs to open shooters, driving kicks, all that stuff. And that is a good thing for the Timberwolves. All right. A couple other quick notes, and then we'll do studs and duds from Saturday, and that's how we'll close out the show. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends over at Stitch Fix. With Stitch Fix, you can get a stylist who understands your style, size, and budget. They do all the shopping for you. It's absolutely the easiest way to update your wardrobe this season. Easily upgrade your wardrobe this year with a professional stylist that helps you find new on-trend favorites that will work for you. You just give your stylist your size, style, and budget preferences. They order boxes when you want and how you want with no subscription required. Plus, they'll send you 5 just for you pieces, plus outfit recommendations and pro styling advice. You just keep what works and you send back the rest. Your stylist will always send just right pieces and the fit is on point. It's like they have style ESP. I have no idea how they do it, but trust me, they'll just get you. Stitch Fix makes it so easy that if you don't like to shop, they can still save you that time and effort. Plus, you can get outfits that make you look and feel really good. If you don't love something, just send it back. Shipping, returns, and exchanges are always free. Style that makes you feel as good as you look. Get started today at stitchfix.com/lockedon. That's stitchfix.com/lockedon. Stitchfix.com/lockedon. All right, some final thoughts from the weekend on Friday. I thought offensively for Minnesota, I talked about the defense already. I thought offensively it was more about just being sloppy. They actually shot the ball okay when they got open shots. It was, Cat and Ant, neither one of them shot the ball well. Like if we take out the last, it all counts, right? And they did make this a one-possession game. So credit where credit's due. Cat and Ant came alive late. But they had a halftime lead, and Cat and Ant were nowhere to be found in the third quarter. Those guys actually, even by halftime, it was all like Rudy in the paint. It was some of the bench stuff with Alexander Walker and Nas in the second quarter that really got them going. Offensively, Cat and Ant were nowhere to be found until very late in that game. It was more about the stars not playing well and some sloppiness. And yeah, 13 turnovers, like I said, I think the word I used on Friday on the postcast was it's a palatable number. You can live with 13 turnovers in a game. But it was the time and the place of those turnovers and the fact that the defense couldn't slow down Dame in the third quarter, especially. But I didn't have any flashing alarm bells about the offense on Friday. On Saturday, in the first half, it was more about Ant driving into a crowd, not finding the open shooters, and also the Wolves missing open shots. Like Alexander Walker 0 for 5 in this game on threes, and at least 3 of those were wide open shots he usually makes. He's shooting a career high from 3. Like he's going to be fine. Nas, same thing. Like Nas has been horrendous shooting the ball the last couple nights. He was 0 for 5 on Saturday from 3, 1 for 6 on Friday. And I thought he actually played well besides the shooting in both games, actually. Defensively, I thought Nas was good on Friday. Saturday, he was huge on the glass, especially late in that game. Remember, no Rudy Gobert. So Nas getting 9 rebounds in 27 minutes is nothing to sneeze at, especially when his shot appeared to be broken. He had a nice dunk, a well-rounded game, just not making shots. The 3 blocks we talked about. So it was missing open shots on Saturday, or the first half. It was mostly poor playmaking, really. And I put a lot of that on Anthony Edwards in the first half of that game. But when it was all said and done, both Ant and Cat played really well Saturday, especially compared to Friday night. So again, just missing open shots, and that happens. They still won by 15. All right, studs and duds from Saturday only. Anthony Edwards, I'm still going to give him a stud. 29 points on 23 shots. We will take that. 8 rebounds, 3 assists, 2 steals, only 1 turnover, which is nice, especially with only having 3 assists. 11 of 23 from the field. Only 1 of 3 outside the arc, 6 of 9 at the free throw line. There were no free throws called. I don't think he shot a single free throw. Ant didn't in the first quarter, but he finished with 9 free throw attempts. So good on him to keep coming and only shoot 3 threes in this game. He shot 22s and 3 threes. But a good Ant game. I'm also going to give one to Cat. It was a little uneven, but in a game with no Rudy, I thought he was physical enough. He was a game high plus 20 and plus minus. 28 points on 8 of 17 shooting, 4 of 8 on threes. Hit a couple big ones in the third quarter of this game when the Wolves were trying to create some separation. And really, not just that, they were just trying to take a lead. They were down at halftime of this game. 28, 9, and 4, 2 blocks and a steal for Karl-Anthony Towns, a perfect 8 of 8 at the line. A really, really good cat game. My third stud is Kyle Anderson. Slow-mo was very good and got the start in place of Rudy Gobert. Started at the 4, 12 points, 9 rebounds, 3 assists. Good to see him get a chance to play the 4. Remember, he hasn't done a whole lot of that this year. He's been forced to play the 3, which I think has contributed to some of the challenges we've seen with Kyle Anderson. He missed 2 3-pointers early badly. Like, he missed them short. It was ugly. Besides that, he was awesome. 12 and 9, 3 assists, and a block in this game. No turnovers for Slow-mo, and that's been an issue for him this year. I think it's been a career worst, or at least worse in the last 5 or 6 years in terms of individual turnover rate for Kyle Anderson this year. So it was good to see him take care of the basketball and overall just have a really strong performance. I thought he was quite good in this game. So my studs, Kyle Anderson, Karl-Anthony Towns, Anthony Edwards. I do not have any duds. I know Alexander Walker was 0 of 6 from the field with a couple turnovers, but I thought he was very good defensively. He also had 6 rebounds in this game, which was, big. The Wolves lost the battle on the glass by 5. They didn't have Gobert. They did give up 16 offensive rebounds to the Nets, which is far too many, of course, but I thought he played well overall. Morris was pretty good. Monte Morris, arguably his most well-rounded game as a Wolf. I thought he was very good. He saw the floor late first quarter with about 3 minutes left in the first after not playing at all until the second quarter and fourth quarter. He didn't play at all in the first and third quarters on Friday. So his minutes expanded a little on the back-to-back and with a shorter bench. McLaughlin saw rotation minutes in the first half. He was the 9th man in this game with no Rudy Gobert, which I thought was interesting, but it makes sense. So no duds in this game. All right, Minnesota's off again tonight. No game Monday night. The Timberwolves play again on Tuesday, so they've got this weird, back-to-back Friday, Saturday, coming out of the All-Star break. So 8 days off. They get a back-to-back. Then they get 2 days off, Sunday and Monday, before playing again Tuesday and Wednesday, another back-to-back at home. They get San Antonio Tuesday, which has been a tough matchup for Minnesota. They've won 2 out of 3, but it hasn't been pretty, and they lost the last time they faced the Spurs. So that's far from an easy one. And then Memphis on Wednesday on the second night of a back-to-back. We'll see if Rudy's available. My guess is he'll be listed as questionable, but he'll get 3 days of rest because he didn't play Saturday. He's Sunday, Monday off after tweaking the ankle Friday. So it seems like there'd be a good chance he plays in at least one of those 2 games here midweek. And then they're off Thursday before they play Friday against Sacramento, off Saturday, and then another home back-to-back against the Clippers and Blazers next Sunday and Monday, with Sunday being a matinee game. So Tuesday, we'll talk Wolves Spurs. We'll revisit the horror of what happened the last time the Wolves saw Wembanyama, that late game collapse in late January, I think, against the Spurs. So we'll talk about that on Tuesday, among other things. And get ready for some more winnable home games for Minnesota. They really need to rack up some wins here as they head into a tough road trip. Pacers, Cleveland, Lakers, Clippers, Jazz, all upcoming after this long homestand. So important to win these next few. All right, that's all we have for today here on the show. A big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere, including YouTube, as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. And you can follow on X at Locked On T-Wolves and also at Beecken with 2 B's, 2 E's, C-K-E-N. Of course, the Locked On Wolves podcast is part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Remember, the Locked On Network is your local experts on all the biggest stories. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.